Have you ever looked around and wondered, how come it seems like those individuals who get ahead seem to get further and further ahead over time? Well, there's a quote in the New Testament that touches on this phenomenon. From the book of Matthew, verse 13:12, it says, "To those who have much, more will be given." And the question is, why does this happen? And what can you and I learn from it? Instead of using religious prophecy from the book of Matthew, today I'm going to share two statistical concepts to help explain this phenomenon. So thank you for joining me. My name is Eric Amzalag. I do comprehensive financial plans for my clients at Peak Financial Planning. And it is so important that you understand these two laws of statistics that shape the worlds of business and finance. So the first law here is called Price's Law, and this was researched and discovered by a man named Derek de la Sola Price. And Price's Law states that the square root of the number of employees or producers produce 50% of the output at any organization. In plain English, Price's Law tells us that a tiny minority of producers produce the majority of the output on any project or creative endeavor. I'm going to show you what this means in actual numbers in a second. But when I learned this, it blew my mind. And the thing was, I didn't actually know how to process this information or make use of it at first. Hopefully today, I'll be able to help you skip past the processing part and move straight to the implementing and using part. Okay, so let's look at some numbers to help explain this phenomenon. So this chart here shows company size, and then the number of employees that Price's Law states will contribute 50% of the work, and then that percentage of employees as a percent of the organization. So you can see here that a company that has 10 employees, 3 of those employees, or 30% of the organization, are going to produce 50% of the work or output of that organization. When you have a company that's 100 people, 10 of those employees, so 10 of the 100, which is 10% of the organization, produce 50% of the work. At a company sized 10,000 employees, 100 employees, 1% of the organization will produce 50% of the work. Crazy. When you get to 100,000, 315 of the employees out of that 100,000 person organization, or 0.3% of the organization, are going to produce 50% of the work. All right, so the question is, what do we do with this information and why is it important? Why am I sharing it with you? Probably have played Where's Waldo at some point. It was this little picture book game. You had this little candy cane dressed man on the left here with the hat and the red striped shirt, and he was hidden on a picture or a book on an image of hundreds and hundreds of people, and your goal was to look very closely at the picture and try to find Waldo. And what this says is that what the Price's Law says that finding truly high producers or expertise is like finding Waldo. You have a ton of people and you got to find them in the crowd. And so we want to make use of this phenomenon. So what does Price's Law actually tell us, and then how do we make use of it? Well, number one, highly successful producers are extremely rare. It means that most people we actually see or interact with in the world are not highly successful producers. The majority of the people we see are not highly successful producers. Number two, most of the successful producers are actually invisible. It's just a numbers game. So just like Waldo in the picture that I showed you previously, the highly successful producers are hidden by the masses of people who are not producing. So when you look around to try to identify who is productive, who has the secret to success, you can't actually find them. They're obscured by the masses. They're hidden away. So you can see that number two leads to number three, which is that figuring out who is actually highly successful is an extremely valuable way to spend our time. If we can avoid distractions or fakes, those people that are not actually highly successful but appear to be, then we can save tons of time and attention that can be used applying what we learn from those productive models and thereby accelerate our pathway to wealth or expertise or skill or whatever it is we're trying to learn. Okay, so let's move on to the second principle, the Pareto Principle. You might have heard this principle referred to as the 80-20 rule, but basically it says that 20% of the time spent on anything produces 80% of the results or outcomes. And this is a time management phenomenon that helps us select for the right activities that will produce the best results. Again, just like before with Price's Law, the question is, well, what do we do with this and what are we supposed to make of this information? Well, if you're anything like me, then when you set about to learn something new or just become more proficient at something that you're already doing, you probably feel like this lady here on the screen with all these thought bubbles. You have a million ideas and a million things you could do. The question is, how do we filter down what we can do to what we should do? And the thing is, the Pareto Principle tells us that most of the things we end up putting our time and attention to will not be productive. So, what does it actually tell us to do, and how do we interpret it? Well, number one, it tells us people waste a ton of time. Obviously, that must be the case. If 80% of the activities produce 20% of the results, those are highly inefficient and ineffective activities, and so we should probably figure out how to spend less or avoid those things altogether. The second thing is, most of us don't know what's actually valuable to spend time on. Again, illustrated by that previous photo, the hardest part is figuring out what are the 20% of activities that produce the 80% of results. What do we spend our time on that's valuable? Which leads again to number three, similar to Price's law, figuring out what to spend time on is one of the most valuable things to spend our time on. You might even say that this is a Pareto optimized activity, that this activity of thinking about what to spend time on is one of the 20% activities that produce 80% of the results. And just like Price's law, if by thinking ahead, you can filter out 80% of the ineffective stuff so that you can focus on the 20% of things that are important, you will return yourself a tremendous amount of time and attention, which in turn will accelerate your progress and your results. So Price's law and the 80-20 rule or Pareto principle both tell us a story about scarcity. Scarcity of truly productive individuals and truly productive activities. The reason this matters is that the quickest way to success in anything is to mimic what successful individuals are doing. And the problem is that experience doesn't necessarily equal productivity or results. And experience is usually the benchmark that we use to evaluate who we should learn from. Experience meaning tenure, which is how long we've been doing something. And how long we've been doing something doesn't necessarily mean we're producing outsized results at that activity. We want to combine Price's law with the Pareto principle to give us a framework or a tool that we can use to solve the problem of what we should be spending our time on. So as you can see from point number one here, the best way to figure out what to spend our time on is to figure out who to mimic. So we're going to use Price's law to filter down the pool of total possible people we might observe or copy, and then remind ourselves that most of those that we observe are not the ones we want to copy. Step two here is this requires an investment of time and effort. So you're probably going to want to read some books, listen to some podcasts, or even ask for referrals from friends who have successfully found this Price's law approved role model that can help narrow the pool down of people we want to mimic or copy behaviors. And then step three, once you've identified Price's law approved role models, you want to mimic their behaviors, not their results. Most of those highly productive, highly successful individuals are automatically focusing on the 20% of activities that disproportionately produce results. What this means for you and I is that we don't have to guess what we should be doing. We can just watch this Price's law optimized person and copy what they're doing without having to worry too much about whether we are hitting the important actions or not. My recommendation is that nothing will accelerate your progress towards the outcomes you want in life faster than finding a mentor or role model whom you can copy. Again, the challenge is, how do you copy the right person? The world is filled with distractions and people sharing unsolicited advice, but are sharing advice and it's not easily provable whether they are actually in that fraction of people who produce outsized results. Anyhow, so I hope this topic was as interesting to you as it was for me to research and produce this video. And these days, I find myself constantly asking, is the person I'm observing one of the 20%, or are they in the 80%? And if I'm not 100% sure that they're in the 20%, then I'm going to go back and continue my search until I find someone who fits that criteria. All right, please like, comment, and subscribe to this video. It really helps my channel grow. It helps my videos get found. And then once again, thank you for watching this video. Your future self will thank you.